Hi, how are you? This video is about one of the main challenges that lies ahead of us in the journey of change. Now, I spent a lot of time in talking about trauma, where it comes from, what it is, the influence and effects that it has from the very moment of its origins up until the rest of our life. What I would like to talk about in depth here now is really what is involved in the journey of changing your life. Now, first of all, it is a monumental term, right? Saying to anybody around you that I want to change my life already creates an internal struggle. Now, it creates an internal struggle because if I say to somebody I care about, which I already have a value attached to how that person sees me, depending on how they react to this thing I want to do, I want to change my life, before I can even go ahead and start this change process, now all of a sudden I have to deal with what they think of me as well. And in essence, that's what the video is about. Now, I've got notes here, so if I look down, bear with me. So one of the major struggles we face during the whole process of change is updating our own self-view, right? How we view ourselves. Why do we decide to change in the very first place? We decide to change because it hurts, right? To stay the same starts to hurt so much that eventually any fear that we might have of changing and the unknown and what lies ahead of us just becomes bearable, because the pain just becomes way too much. Why do we need to change? Why does this pain become so incredibly difficult? Well, the reason is quite complicated, but I will put it as simple as what I understand it. So as I understand it, right, both in the stuff that I went through in my own life and as well as the work that I do at the moment, is everything that we go through in our life, right, from childhood to where you are right now, is dependent on one very specific thing. It's dependent on how we see ourselves. The majority of the cases, how we see ourselves depends on the people we care about, their opinions of us. So in effect, what we do is we carry around this idea inside of us of this is who I am, this is who I want to be, and this is how the people around me tell me who I am, who I should be for them. But we never create this divide, this filter, to realize that based on their own reality, this is how they see me. Okay, most of the cases, they have their own traumas and their own stressors and their own shit, their own pain that they also still not have dealt with yet, hopefully. So by the time that we decide that it's time for me to change, this big barrier now lies ahead of me. Now, to make it more complicated, the fact that I still carry so much pain with me internally is directly linked to how I have been translating my life information. All of the things I remember about myself, the things that I have been through, the things I have done, the things I have achieved, all of my experiences have multiple translations, right? Multiple translations. Now, I quickly want to pause it here and add another part. Previous videos I described our human needs. And this really comes into play here. So just as a very quick recap, I would like to remind you. First human need is our need for safety and security. Our second human need is our need to belong. Our third human need is our need for self-expression. Then our fourth human need automatically becomes social philanthropy. Because once you tick box 1, 2, and 3, you basically have your life in a state of equilibrium, right? Equilibrium, balance. That means you realize all of a sudden now, listen, I can make everything around me better as well because I have made my own life better. Now, how does this relate to why it's difficult to change? It relates to why it's difficult to change because the pain that we experience throughout our lifetime caused by trauma, right? Childhood trauma predominantly, but also adolescence and adult trauma. Childhood trauma caused mainly by neglect, abandonment, and abuse. That then rolls over and spills over into adolescent trauma, and that then spills over again into adult trauma. But in adult trauma, from a psychological spectrum, more in a sense of developmental long-term trauma. All of these things relate to how I see myself and how I think of myself. Previously, I went in depth into why, as children, we end up thinking that we're doing something wrong. For the purpose of this video, I would like to add it again quickly. When our first need as a child, safety and security, is not met, and when one of our primary caregivers are going through a very difficult time themselves, obviously what's going to happen is we're going to experience neglect, abandonment, or abuse. One of those three things. Now, the part of our brain actually necessary and used in order to conceptualize the world, right, to create understanding, is the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex only is developed in our mid to late 20s. So we physically are not able to translate what's happening during our childhood. Because of this, right, what we do is we use our primary parts of our brains, our primal parts of our brains, to translate this information. This tells us then that my primary source of survival is in danger, right? So not me, not them, my life is in fucking danger, quite literally. So what we end up thinking, right, is that I must be doing something wrong. Me, I'm doing something wrong, not them. So their behavior can be as messed up as what you're going to get, because you're a child and because these places, these areas in your brain is not yet developed. Inevitably, we turn the situation around and we just end up thinking that I did something wrong. Now, what makes this quite extraordinary is that this is a blueprint process. It's not that anybody is doing something wrong or right. It's everybody goes through this. This is by design, how we are designed. How does this relate to why it's difficult to change? Because of the following. So when I'm a child, when I go through a traumatic experience, I create a self-view based on what my external environment tells me, related to, is my actual primary needs met? So as an example, my safety and security is not being met because one of my parents is a raging alcoholic. I turn into a very responsible child, okay? Also, I turn into a fucking adult in my childhood because now all of a sudden I feel like I have to take care of my primary primary source of survival, my safety and security source. So as a consequence of this, I develop a self-view that if I do not take this responsibility and take care of this source of my primary survival, then I'm doing something wrong. Then I'm in danger. I'm endangering my own life. So to bring it a bit further then, right, this is just in our childhood, our formative years. This leads on again in our adolescence as well, and into our adulthood. So to put everything together then, what happens is I end up inevitably with a self-view that was developed in my childhood, okay, in order to compensate for whatever I experience needs are not being met. Then, because that's there already, now it flows over. Now I developed an additional self-view in my adolescence, because remember, my body changed. So I'm getting new information, my brain structure has changed, so I'm perceiving and translating new information. Then in my adulthood, I add another self-translation, right? Because the information around us keeps being, no, that's not the right way. The information around us keeps being translated continuously differently based on how we develop, right? So now already we have 3 completely different self-views and internal self-identities based on the stuff, the shit we experienced as children. Now to make this even worse, right, and this is kind of where the crux is. This is why I'm calling this video the internal war. To make it even worse, even before we can realize any of these things, we get stuck at one very specific point. What do people think of me? What are they going to think about me if they find this out? What are they going to think about me if they find out I am not strong enough? Are they going to think I'm weak? I'm a man. I'm not supposed to be weak. I cannot think these things. So because we fight against the outside world's opinions of us as individuals, right, how they see us based on their own traumas, once again, I reiterate that. Because we do that, we never have enough processing space to actually ask the real questions. What have I been going through? What did I go through? How did it affect my life? How did it affect the rest of my life? Why is my relationship really broken? What caused it? What is the origins of my pain? We get stuck in what other people's opinions of us have been all of our lives. So the internal war that we experience then, right, before we even get to the stage where we realize this is just getting too much, I have to change. That war is 3-tiered. What do I want to think about myself? Number 1. Number 2, what do I think I should think of myself? Number 3, who have the world, all the people around me, been telling me I am up until now? These are 3 incredibly difficult places to get through, because instinctively we feel we need to belong, to be safe. And it is, in my experience, this is the challenge, to see through all of the subjective translations, because objectively that's all they are. It's how we look at our life experience, and then we attach to those subjective experiences. We end up believing the translations as being the only truth, but it's not. It's just one. It's one truth, not the only truth. These translations can be redefined relative to viewing the experience in a more objective way. They can be updated, reintegrated into the current version. The last thing then, and I will leave you with this. Change is a constant process. It's not a pill you swallow. It's a doing thing. It's not just changing how you think. It's achieving that equilibrium between how you think and what you do. Unless you update your behavior, does not matter how you update your thinking, you will stay the same. The next video, I will go in depth of how we can change and what that means. What else? That's it. Thank you. Take care.